Crack boom. The deafening explosive rupture of the fuselage tears through the pressurized cabin, instantly followed by a violent, shrieking hurricane of -60-degree air that sucks the breath straight out of your lungs. The deafening metallic screech of shearing aluminum completely drowns out the chorus of human screams. Whoosh! The businessman sitting in the window seat right next to you is violently ripped out into the black night sky, his heavy nylon seatbelt snapping like cheap brittle twine under the catastrophic pressure differential. The cabin pressure drops to absolute zero in a fraction of a millisecond. Your eardrums rupture with a sickening wet pop, flooding your inner ear with warm blood. The overhead compartments burst violently open, unleashing a lethal, chaotic hail of heavy luggage and shattered plastic. The massive Boeing 777 violently pitches downward, dropping its nose and pushing zero-G forces straight into your stomach. The yellow emergency oxygen masks drop from the ceiling, swinging wildly like plastic pendulums of death. You are plunging at 600 miles per hour directly into the dark, frozen abyss. V1. The point of departure. 3 hours earlier, the world was a sanctuary of mundane routines and predictable, comfortable safety. You stand in the brightly lit, sterile corridor of Terminal 4, breathing in the familiar, comforting cocktail of floor wax, roasted coffee, and the faint, kerosene-like tang of burnt jet fuel bleeding through the glass windows. You are a deadheading commercial airline pilot, hitching a ride back to your home hub after a grueling 4-day rotation. You know this exact aircraft model, the Boeing 777-200ER, inside and out. You know the exact thrust output of its massive Pratt & Whitney PW4000 turbofan engines. You are sitting in seat 12C, an aisle seat situated directly over the central wing box, mathematically the strongest structural point of the entire titanium and aluminum airframe. The boarding process is a rhythmic, lulling symphony of normalcy. The thump-thump of passengers dragging roller bags down the carpeted aisle. The muted chimes of the overhead PA system. The lead flight attendant's voice echoes clearly, "Flight attendants, doors to automatic and cross-check." You hear the heavy, vault-like clunk of the main cabin door sealing shut, locking you inside the pressurized tube. The subtle, high-pitched whine of the APU, auxiliary power unit, kicks in, pushing cool, conditioned air through the overhead vents, drying the sweat on your forehead. You stow your black leather flight bag under the seat in front of you. Inside you have your FAA-issued heavy steel flashlight, your logbook, and your fireproof Nomex flight jacket. You buckle the lap belt, feeling the heavy metal buckle click securely over your hips, instinctively pulling the strap an inch tighter than a normal passenger would. The pushback tug engages with a heavy shudder. Outside, the deep resonant rumble of the massive turbofans spooling up to idle thrust vibrates through the soles of your shoes. The aircraft begins to taxi, the rhythmic clack-clack of the heavy landing gear rolling over the tarmac expansion joints, lulling you into a state of deep relaxation. The takeoff roll begins. The brutal, raw acceleration presses your spine deep into the blue upholstery. You mentally call out the V speeds in your head as the aircraft thunders down the runway. V1. Rotate. V2. The landing gear retracts with a heavy hydraulic clunk beneath the floorboards, and the aircraft lifts off smoothly, piercing the heavy, dark cloud layer. For the first 3 hours, the flight is terrifyingly, beautifully normal. The gentle ding of the seatbelt sign turning off signals the beginning of the cruise phase. The clinking of ice in plastic cups echoes down the aisle as the beverage cart slowly rolls by. You sip a ginger ale, looking out the small oval window across the aisle at the serene, moonlight-bathed sea of clouds 35,000 feet below. The hum of the engines is a steady, white noise blanket. You close your eyes, letting the vibration put you to sleep. It is perfectly safe, the pinnacle of human engineering, until the laws of physics decide otherwise. LV. The catastrophic failure. The transition from absolute safety to pure, unadulterated terror does not begin with a sound, but with a physical, bone-rattling jolt. Thud. The vibration travels directly up the aluminum seat rails and violently up your spine. The steady, comforting hum of the floorboards instantly mutates into an aggressive, asymmetrical buzz. Your eyes snap open. Your pilot's intuition instantly diagnoses the tactile feedback. Compressor stall. You lean over, looking out the window across the aisle. The massive starboard engine is violently surging, coughing violently and spitting 20-foot streaks of raw blue and orange plasma into the freezing night. The entire right wing is shuddering, with a violent harmonic resonance that threatens to tear the rivets right out of the metal. Then, the uncontained catastrophic engine failure occurs. Boom! A massive titanium fan blade snaps off the central rotor at 10,000 revolutions per minute. It acts as a hyperkinetic shrapnel projectile, slicing through the reinforced Kevlar engine, cowling like a hot knife through butter. The blade violently tears straight through the outer aluminum skin of the fuselage, severing vital hydraulic lines and electrical buses in a fraction of a second. The explosive decompression is absolutely instantaneous. The pressurized cabin air, maintained at a comfortable 8,000 feet, violently and aggressively evacuates into the low-pressure stratosphere at 35,000 feet. A thick, blinding white fog of condensed moisture instantly fills the entire cabin as the temperature plummets from a comfortable 72 degrees to -45 degrees Fahrenheit in a single heartbeat. The noise is absolute and mind-shattering, a roaring sustained wind tunnel shriek that violently vibrates your teeth in your skull. The rubber cups of the emergency oxygen masks deploy from the ceiling units with a sharp, synchronized clack. You reach up instinctively, fighting the violent suction of the depressurization, grabbing the yellow plastic cup. You yank it down hard to pull the firing pin on the chemical oxygen generator, pressing the cold rubber firmly over your nose and mouth, slipping the thin elastic band over the back of your head. The smell is instantly nauseating, a mix of burning chemical dust, raw medical-grade rubber, and the metallic tang of your own blood from your ruptured eardrums. The aircraft violently banks right, the autopilot completely disengaging as the flight control computers are overwhelmed by the sudden asymmetry of thrust and the massive aerodynamic drag of the torn fuselage. The nose drops precipitously. The altimeter in the cockpit must be unwinding like a broken stopwatch. You are in a rapid, uncontrolled spiral dive. The G-forces build rapidly, pinning your arms down to the armrests with the weight of wet sandbags. The structural groaning of the airframe, a deep, terrifying, metallic creak-creak groan, signals that the airframe is being pushed far beyond its maximum design limit loads. The passengers around you are screaming, their eyes wide with primal animalistic panic, but their voices are swallowed entirely by the deafening roar of the freezing wind and the shrieking, tearing metal of the dying aircraft. You stare straight ahead, your hands gripping the armrests until your knuckles turn completely white, trapped in a falling titanium coffin. Elvira 3, the brace position and the impact. 10,000 feet. The outside air rapidly thickens. The roaring, high-pitched wind slightly subsides, suddenly replaced by an eerie, terrifying and profound silence. Both engines have flamed out, starved of fuel and shredded by shrapnel. The massive Boeing 777 is now a 300-ton glider with the aerodynamic glide ratio of a falling brick. The captain's voice suddenly crackles over the PA system. It is heavily distorted, frantic, stripping away decades of calm, practiced professionalism. Brace for impact, brace, brace, brace. Muscle memory overrides your paralyzing terror. You lean violently forward, crossing your forearms tightly over the seat back in front of you, pressing your forehead rigidly against your wrists. You lock your feet flat and hard against the floorboards, tucking your chin deeply into your chest to protect your vulnerable cervical spine from the impending whiplash. The kinetic energy building up is mathematically staggering. You are dropping blindly into the absolute darkness of a dense mountainous pine forest covered in deep, unforgiving winter snow. Every muscle in your body is clenched, flooded with lethal doses of adrenaline. You close your eyes, waiting for the violent end of your existence. The trees hit the aircraft first. Snap, crash, shatter. The massive, wide-body fuselage acts like a giant, unstoppable aluminum lawnmower, violently shearing through 100-foot-tall, ancient timber. The deafening sound of massive tree trunks snapping like matchsticks fills the cabin. The wings are violently and aggressively ripped from the central wing root, shearing the massive bolts and spilling tens of thousands of gallons of highly flammable jet fuel directly into the freezing night air, aerosolizing it into a highly explosive mist. The violent deceleration is physically agonizing. The lap belt bites into your pelvis with enough brute force to heavily bruise the iliac crest of your hip bone, driving the breath completely out of your lungs in a sharp, painful grunt. Then the main structural impact. Crunch screech. The nose of the aircraft slams brutally into the frozen, unforgiving earth. The immense forward momentum carries the massive fuselage forward, instantly buckling the floorboards directly beneath your feet into jagged, upward-facing spikes. The rows of seats immediately in front of you accordion together in a horrific, deafening crunch of tearing metal, snapping plastic, and human bones. The heavy overhead bins detach entirely from their ceiling mounts, raining heavy roller bags, jagged metal paneling, and sparking wiring directly down onto the screaming passengers. The world becomes a violent, spinning centrifuge of raw, kinetic energy, throwing you violently from side to side in your harness. The metal screams, the earth tears, and finally, after what feels like an eternity of violent motion, the mangled aluminum tube grinds to a jarring, brutal, and sudden halt. The silence that immediately follows the crash is thicker, heavier, and far more terrifying than the deafening noise of the impact. Leviathan 4, the Inferno. You open your eyes. Total, absolute darkness, save for the eerie, flickering, malevolent orange glow bleeding violently through the cracked spider-webbed windows on the port side. The smell hits your olfactory senses long before the heat does. The acrid, highly toxic stench of burning electrical wiring, vaporized hydraulic fluid, melting plastic, and raw, pooling jet fuel. You are completely disoriented. The blood is rushing violently to your head. You realize you are hanging entirely upside down. The immense fuselage has rolled completely over onto its roof during the final slide through the forest. Your primal brain screams at you to thrash, to panic, to unbuckle instantly. Your rigorous aviation survival training violently suppresses it. If you unlatch the heavy metal buckle of your seatbelt right now, you will drop 6 feet directly onto your neck, onto the mangled, debris-strewn ceiling below you. You place your left hand firmly on the sturdy plastic ceiling panel below you to brace your impending fall. With your right hand, you twist the metal release mechanism of the belt. Click. You drop hard, your shoulder slamming brutally into a pile of deployed deflated airbags and shattered oxygen masks. The pain is sharp, radiating down your collarbone, but you are mobile. Hiss, crackle. A fire has violently ignited in the forward galley section. Toxic, thick, pitch-black cyanide smoke is rapidly pooling at the ceiling, which is now the floor you are crawling on. You know the grim reality of aviation disasters. If you inhale 2 deep breaths of that heavy, toxic black smoke, you will lose consciousness and burn alive in your sleep. You drop completely flat onto your stomach, pressing your face into the freezing metal to find the 2 inches of breathable air remaining. The floor is slick, wet with a horrifying mixture of hydraulic fluid, melted snow, and human blood. You begin to crawl. Exit over the wing, you mutter to yourself, the mantra keeping you focused. The primary forward and aft doors are structurally warped shut by the immense impact forces. You crawl over mangled seats, over heavy, spilled luggage, over the motionless, silent bodies of the people you were just flying with hours ago. The ambient heat is aggressively intensifying, blistering the sensitive skin on the back of your neck. The crackle of the fire grows louder, transforming into a hungry, snapping, roaring beast that is rapidly consuming the thermal insulation of the cabin walls. You reach the overwing emergency exit row. The heavy plug door is already gone, blown completely out during the violent deceleration of the impact. In its place is a jagged, twisted hole of tearing aluminum leading directly out into the freezing, howling darkness outside. You grab the jagged, sharp edge of the torn fuselage, feeling the cold metal bite deeply through the skin of your palms, drawing warm blood. You violently drag your battered, exhausted body through the narrow opening, dropping 6 feet down into thigh-deep, freezing, pristine white snow. The final, the apex of the elements. You stagger clumsily away from the burning wreckage, your heavy boots sinking deep into the unforgiving powder. You turn around, gasping for the freezing, clean air. The Boeing 777 is a mangled, burning carcass, a horrific metal skeleton, illuminating the dense, snow-covered pine forest with a hellish, flickering orange glow. The radiant heat from the burning jet fuel warms your face, but the ambient temperature of the wilderness is hovering near -20 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind cuts through your torn clothes like a physical blade. You quickly check your physical condition. Your Nomex jacket is torn and stained with soot. Your hands are bleeding freely from the jagged metal. A sharp, stabbing, agonizing pain in your lower right ribs, with every breath, strongly suggests a compound fracture. You reach into your pocket. By some miracle, Your heavy steel FAA flashlight is still there. Then a new sound entirely cuts through the violent crackle of the jet fuel fire. Howl. It is a low, guttural, collective howl echoing deeply from the dark, impenetrable tree line. The overwhelming smell of fresh blood, aviation fuel and burning flesh has acted as a beacon, attracting the apex predators of the frozen taiga, a large pack of starving timber wolves. You squint into the dark. You can clearly see the reflection of the roaring flames in their pale yellow unblinking eyes, slowly and methodically, circling the outer perimeter of the light, waiting for the weak, the injured, the survivors. The immense heat of the wreckage begins to aggressively ignite the surrounding ancient pine trees, the sap exploding with loud pops, creating a massive, uncontrollable forest fire that is rapidly spreading outward. You are completely trapped. Behind you is a roaring 1,000-degree inferno of melting aluminum and exploding jet fuel that is rapidly closing in on your position. In front of you is the pitch-black freezing wilderness, guarded by a pack of highly coordinated starving predators waiting for you to step out of the light. You grip the heavy, cold steel cylinder of the flashlight, feeling the icy metal press aggressively against your bleeding palm. The massive lead wolf steps slowly out from behind a snow-covered pine, its grey fur illuminated by the fire, baring its teeth in a low, vibrating, chest-rattling growl. The searing heat of the approaching fire licks the back of your torn jacket. The freezing, biting wind numbs your face. You thumb the rubber switch of the heavy flashlight, blinding the massive beast with 1,000 lumens of LED light, clench your bleeding jaw against the agonizing pain in your ribs, and take a heavy, definitive step forward into the dark, freezing unknown.